What's up everybody, we're finally back with another raid guide, and today we're taking a look at Wrathion on Mythic difficulty. I'll be going over most of the mechanics, how to deal with them, and our overall tactic for this fight. So for this encounter you want 2 tanks, 4 healers, and 14 DPS. Classes that can remove snares will have it a bit easier in this fight, but nothing mandatory. However, if you want to bring something, then bring monks and paladins. They're great for this due to freedom and Tiger's Lust, but more on this later. With that said, let's check out the new Mythic mechanic. On Mythic, you will have to deal with something called Creeping Madness. Creeping Madness is a stacking slow debuff, if you will. Anytime you move, you gain a stack. At 50 stacks, you take like 300k shadow damage anytime you move. So, needless to say, you do not want to stack this up to 50. You can reset this stack by using abilities that remove snare, like Hunter Disengage when you're spec'd into Post Haste or Vengeful Retreat, or by using Tiger's Lust or Freedom. The stacks will also drop if you haven't moved at all for 30 seconds. Creeping Madness is also removed when you hit phase 2 and reapplied again when you go back into phase 1. So this means in phase 2 there is no Creeping Madness. So the idea is pretty much plan your movement ahead of time, don't move unless you have to, like if you're targeted by Incineration or the boss casts Gale Blast. If your class can't remove snares by themselves, make sure to call out for a Freedom or Tiger's Lust if you're on high stacks. However, a lot of times if you aren't targeted by Incineration, the stacks will drop by themselves as long as you don't AD spam like a pro melee player would. And in phase 2, the crackling shards that spawn no longer gets insta-gibbed if you run over them with Burning Madness. Instead, they lose their immunity, but you still have to nuke them down this time around. So you want to focus on clearing any large clusters of shards first, then move on to shards that can't be cleaved. It is perfectly fine if you don't manage to clear all shards, just focus on shards that are clumped up, and try and clear the middle of the room as much as possible. With that said, let's go over the fight, starting with phase 1. At the start of the fight, tank the boss where it spawns, but face it to either of the sides of the room. Melee be on the side of the boss facing the actual room, and range a couple of yards away from the melee camp. If you get targeted by Incineration, drop your debuff behind range or to the sides of them. No need to run super far with it though. If needed, you can use gateways going from melee and out to minimize the amount of Creeping Madness stacks you get when you run out with either Incineration or when the boss casts Gale Blast. Otherwise, use gateways for when Burning Cataclysm ends to get to the boss a bit faster if he spawns really far away. Roughly around the 1 minute mark, Wrathion will use his first Burning Cataclysm. Keep an eye on the glimmery smoke that Wrathion turns into. Opposite of that glimmery smoke will be the safe spot for the intermission. Once the Burning Cataclysm is done, don't chase after Wrathion the first thing you do, since you still have Creeping Madness. Unless he spawns super far away from your safe zone, just let him come to you. Just make sure to turn him before his searing breath so you don't wipe the raid. Since you will be AFKing in the same position throughout Burning Cataclysm and until the boss reaches you, a lot of you will reset your Creeping Madness stack simply by AFKing there until the boss gets to you. So to clarify, after each Burning Cataclysm you will need to reposition Wrathion in whichever way gives you the least amount of Creeping Madness stacks. And usually that's just letting him get to the raid, then turning him before the breath. If he spawns super far away from the safe zone, use gateways to get closer and then let him come to you. Following this, more phase 1, second Burning Cataclysm at around 220 mark, followed by phase 2. Keep in mind that phase 2 removes the Creeping Madness debuff, so when you're running to a safe zone on the second Burning Cataclysm of each phase 1, you do not need to min-max your stacks to keep him low, just do not hit 50 stacks. But hey, if you're on 45 stacks when you're in the safe zone, it's fine, since they drop as soon as phase 2 starts. Just make sure you actually do reach the safe zone. So, for phase 2, you want 3 high mobility classes to pick up the scales to gain the Burning Madness debuff, so they can run over the shards to make him vulnerable to damage. Assign each shard breaker to a lane, if you will, like one focuses on shards on the right side of the room, one middle, one left. The rest of the raid should stay close to whichever cluster of shards you're currently nuking down to make it a bit easier for tanks to pick up the assassin. As I previously mentioned, you want to focus down the larger clusters of shards first, then move on to the other shards that are alone, or if they spawn far away from the rest. And again, it's fine if you don't clear every single shard, just be prepared for some more raid damage due to the rising heat debuff from unkilled shards. And the assassins can be a bit tricky to spot, what with all of the shards up, so feel free to stun any assassins you see so the tanks get a bit more time to pick them up. Following this, rinse repeat, depending on your overall DPS, be prepared for the ever-increasing raid damage from rising heat. If you have multiple phase 2 where you do not kill all the shards, nothing major but worth keeping in mind. And for all you DPS players out there, keep in mind the burning cataclysm timer since you can't DPS during it. Feels bad if you pop a really big cooldown and the boss just flies away. And for you tanks out there, position yourself so you can tank swap without having to move and without getting hit by the other tank's breath. Second application of Searing Breath hits pretty hard, so make sure to have a CD or external up for those. And you tank swap on the second stack every time. Healers, you want to keep an eye on players with Incineration and make sure to have cooldowns up for later incinerations if the raid also have a couple of stacks of Rising Heat. And I think that's pretty much it. So with that said, if you have any questions, make sure to hit me up on Facebook or become a Patreon. As a Patreon, you will get access to my Discord where you can find all of our healing notes, weak auras, and it's the fastest way to get a hold of me if you need any help during your progression. And there's also a ton of other Patreons there that help each other out during progression. So make sure to check that out. And as always, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button, leave me a like, and ring that notification bell. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.